When a producer tells an actor, "You'll never be A-list," that actor either breaks or turns those words into fuel. What did Steve McQueen do? Neither. He did something far more dangerous. He never forgot those words. And years later, on the day of reckoning, he sat across from that producer without saying a single word. Los Angeles, 1958. Hollywood back then was a caste system. The major studios ruled the city. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Paramount, Warner Brothers. These weren't just film companies. They could build an actor's career or destroy it with a single phone call. Every executive, every producer, every casting director, walking those studio corridors, knew exactly how much power they held. And most of them used it without a second thought. Steve McQueen was 28 years old that year. He had a striking face, sandy hair, sharp blue eyes, a jaw that always seemed slightly clenched. But in Hollywood, that wasn't enough. In those days, hundreds of young men roamed the streets of Los Angeles, chasing the same dream. McQueen was one of them, but with a different kind of past. He'd never known his father. He'd been in and out of reform school as a kid. He'd worked the merchant marine, worked construction. Life had been hard on him from the very beginning, and McQueen had absorbed that hardness so completely that it no longer left marks on his face. It only showed in his eyes. The look of a man who'd seen things and wasn't going to talk about them. He'd trained at the Actors Studio in New York, then made his way to Los Angeles. He'd picked up small TV roles, a handful of scenes worth of camera time. His name was known, but nobody was taking him seriously yet. That morning he'd been called into the studio. The secretary told him Arthur Feldman wanted to see him, one of the most powerful producers at Paramount. McQueen had pressed his trousers, polished his shoes. He rode his motorcycle to the studio gate and walked the rest of the way. He didn't have a car yet. The sun hammered down on Los Angeles at that hour. The palm trees in the studio courtyard stood perfectly still. The security guard waved him through without asking his name, which wasn't a good sign. It meant his name wasn't known enough. Walking down the corridor, he watched the people around him. Men in suits, assistants moving fast, young women carrying script binders. This world had its own language, and McQueen hadn't fully learned it yet, but he wanted to. When he reached the office door, he took a slow breath and walked in. He didn't know yet that when he walked back out, the world would look different to him, and the single sentence spoken in that office would be the thing that got Steve McQueen out of bed every morning for the next 8 years. To understand Arthur Feldman, you had to understand how Hollywood worked. Feldman was one of the most influential associate producers of his era. Pushing 50, the kind of man who combed his gray hair the same way every single day and always left a cup of cold coffee sitting on his desk. Over the years he'd cast dozens of actors and cut the career strings of dozens more. For him, the math of this business was simple. Some faces sold, some didn't. There was no room for sentiment, just numbers. That morning when McQueen sat down across from him, Feldman placed a few photographs on the desk. Publicity shots McQueen had taken earlier. Feldman studied them for a long moment. Then he looked up. "Steve," he said. His voice was calm. The hum of the office air conditioning filled the room. "I need to be straight with you." McQueen waited. "There are A-list actors in this town. I'm looking at these photographs and I don't see you there. You know where you are right now? You're B-list, maybe C-list. And with these photos, this look, this overall impression you give, I don't see you making it to A-list." Feldman paused, then went a step further. "Not ever." The room went quiet. McQueen didn't move, didn't blink. He just looked at Feldman. It was a particular kind of look. No anger in it. No hurt. Completely empty. Completely still. Like the man across from him was talking about the weather. Then he stood up. "Thank you," he said, and walked out. But the biggest mistake Feldman made that day was not knowing what kind of memory McQueen had. That week, McQueen didn't talk to anyone. His apartment back then was a small place, one of the rougher parts of Los Angeles. A bad neighborhood, the kind of apartment where the roof leaked and the kitchen faucet dripped. In the evenings he'd sit beside his motorcycle, work on the engine, wear himself out. When he didn't want to think, he buried his hands in grease and rust and metal. That night was no different. But Feldman's voice wouldn't leave. Not ever. Just 2 words. And those 2 words drove into McQueen's mind like a nail, and stayed there. He sat beside the bike until late. His hands were black with grease. He stared at his knees. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small scrap of paper, a torn page from a notebook, and wrote one thing: never. 2 words. He underlined them twice, folded the paper, put it in his wallet. That piece of paper stayed there for years. People hear the word never differently. Some collapse under it, some cry, some spend their whole lives trying to silence that voice, and one morning they wake up and realize they've quit. But some people, when they hear that word, feel something different move inside them, something cold, quiet, and dangerous. Not determination, something deeper, a private oath. I will not die before settling this. McQueen was the second kind. The next morning he got up, went to acting class, went back the day after, kept going every day. This went on for months. He took small roles on TV sets, appeared in single-shot scenes in Western shows, played unnamed characters in a couple of Western films. But Feldman's words didn't fade, and McQueen kept feeding off them, because there was something nobody understood about that period. McQueen didn't just want to succeed. He wanted to prove that Feldman was wrong, and those two things were very different. Something happened in 1959. CBS was developing a new Western series called Wanted Dead or Alive. The lead character, Josh Randall, bounty hunter, lone rider, answerable to no one. The casting director had been searching for weeks. There were suggestions from the major studios, more recognizable names, safer choices. But the production team couldn't land on anyone. Then McQueen's name came up. Casting director David Holt looked at McQueen that day and saw something in the eyes, a dangerous calm. Like this man could do anything at any moment, and nothing would ever surprise him. That was exactly Josh Randall, a character who spoke in looks, not words. McQueen got the part, and from the very first episode, the show locked viewers in. Josh Randall's quiet, measured energy. It was McQueen's real personality, projected directly onto the screen. Nothing manufactured, nothing performed, just McQueen. When the camera turned to his face, audiences felt a weight behind those eyes, like this man had lived through things he was never going to share. That mystery pulled people in. Ratings climbed week after week. Audiences took to this new face. Critics started paying attention. And in the corridors of Hollywood, McQueen's name began to be said differently. The show ran for 3 seasons. The production crew had noticed. Every scene McQueen was in, audiences leaned forward. Most actors disappeared on screen. McQueen filled it. And beyond the recognition the show gave him, it gave him discipline. Every week a set, every week a camera. That was the only way to keep Feldman's voice down. The real shock came when McQueen stepped onto the big screen. And when he stepped hard enough that Hollywood talked about it for years. The film The Magnificent Seven. Director John Sturges was adapting Kurosawa's 7 Samurai for America. 7 cowboys, 7 different personalities, 1 purpose. The lead was Yul Brynner, one of the biggest stars of the era. Oscar winner, international name. 6 more spots to fill. McQueen was cast. He'd play Vin. The set was tense from day one. Yul Brynner knew who he was, and he could feel McQueen taking up too much space in their scenes together, not physically, but energetically. McQueen was always doing something, adjusting his hat, resting a hand on his gun, locking his eyes on one point, and not letting go. Small, quiet, deliberate movements. But the camera caught every one of them. Brynner grew uncomfortable. One day he went to Sturges. "McQueen keeps pulling focus," he said. "These aren't his scenes." Sturges listened in silence, then turned to Brynner. "You're both doing good work," he said. That was all. McQueen either didn't know about that conversation, or didn't care. All he ever did in front of a camera was be real. And that realness soaked into every scene. When the film came out, critics wrote glowing pieces about Brynner, but audiences were talking about someone else, Steve McQueen. From that day on, the balance of power in Hollywood began to shift. But the shift wasn't finished yet. The real break came a few years later. The Great Escape. This wasn't a turning point. It was a declaration. McQueen played Hiltz, motorcycle rider, rebel, the prisoner who fought alone. And that scene, the bike tearing toward the wire fence, the jump, the desperate reach for freedom, it went everywhere. Posters, magazine covers, radio programs talked about it. Suddenly McQueen was everywhere. Journalists were knocking on his door. Magazines wanted interviews. People recognized him on the street, something that had never happened before. He'd spent his whole life being invisible, and the weight of being seen caught him off guard at first. But the biggest change wasn't happening on the street. It was happening on the phone. Paramount's phone logs from that period recorded which producers were calling McQueen's office, which projects were being pitched, which numbers were being discussed. And on that list, among several names, was one that was familiar. Arthur Feldman. The same Feldman. The man who'd sat behind that desk in 1958, studied those photographs, and said, "You'll never be A-list." Now he was requesting a meeting through his secretary. How did McQueen feel when that request came through? He never fully said, not in any interview. But the people who were in his office that day noticed something rare on McQueen's face. A smile. Faint, barely there, almost invisible. Feldman came. He sat down across the desk. But this time, the positions were reversed. McQueen was on the other side now, in his own office, in his own chair. Feldman had brought a project. A good one, actually.
High budget, strong distribution, solid script, and it was perfectly suited to McQueen. Action, tension, a powerful character. Feldman knew it. That's why he'd come. He started talking, laid out the project, named the numbers. McQueen listened, never interrupted, heard him all the way to the end. And when Feldman finished, McQueen leaned back slightly in his chair. His voice was calm. The hum of the air conditioning filled the room. The same sound, the same air. Just like 1958. "Arthur," McQueen said. "Do you remember something?" Feldman raised an eyebrow. "Years ago I came to a room like this. Your office, actually. And you told me something." Feldman said nothing. "You said you'll never be A-list." The room froze. Feldman opened his mouth, but McQueen kept going. His voice still hadn't risen a single note. "I walked out that day, and I wrote those 2 words down somewhere. I looked at them every morning, every single day, for 8 years. He paused, held Feldman's eyes. "Now tell me about the project again. I'm listening." Not one word more. No rebuke, no revenge, no victory speech. Just that sentence, and the silence that followed. Nobody knows what Feldman felt that day. But when he left, the secretary saw his face. And what she saw on it she talked about for years. The color had drained completely out of him. McQueen turned the project down. Nobody knows exactly why. Maybe the script was decent but not good enough. Maybe something else was on the table. Maybe he just didn't want to work with Feldman. Or maybe the account was already settled. Sitting across from Feldman, saying those words, staying calm. That was enough. He didn't need to crush the man to win. He just needed to be in that room, in that chair, with those eyes. Some victories are quiet. McQueen's career climbed to its peak over the next decade. Bullet, Le Mans, Papillon, The Towering Inferno, each one bigger than the last. Each one talked about more. By the end of the 1960s, the world had officially named him the King of Cool. He was the highest paid actor on the planet. Arthur Feldman faded away with time. His name is almost never mentioned today. Not in film history books. Not in interviews. History settles its accounts simply sometimes. But the real lesson of this story wasn't McQueen's success, and it wasn't Feldman's defeat. The real lesson was what McQueen was carrying when he walked out of that office in 19... The word never digs some people's graves. But for some that word becomes a hammer. Something they pick up every single morning and use to build. McQueen carried those 2 words for 8 years. It wasn't a burden, it was the thing keeping him upright. Because anger fades, pain passes, motivation comes and goes. But an insult, once it's truly lodged inside you, never leaves. And McQueen knew how to turn it into fuel. What about you? Has anyone in your life ever told you never? A teacher, a boss, a family member. Someone who said you can't do this, you're not meant for this, this is as far as you go. Does that voice still ring in your ears? Maybe it should. Maybe that voice isn't there to stop you. Maybe it's the one thing you need to keep moving. Steve McQueen showed us this. No one gets to decide what you become. And if they try, write down what they said, put it somewhere, and look at it every morning.
This is a fictional story, inspired by public legends and storytelling traditions. Some characters and dialogue have been created for dramatic purposes.